I've been lying awake all night, unable to sleep. I missed my husband more than ever. It had been so long since we'd been together, and on top of that, I was still angry that my mother-in-law refused to return the money she'd borrowed from us. Terry had already told me to let it go and treat it as a gift to his parents, but I couldn't accept the way she'd treated me. Not only had she constantly made my life difficult, she had also taken money that belonged to both of us. Borrowing is borrowing, and giving is giving. If she borrowed the money, she should return it. Whether we chose to give it to her afterward should have been our decision, not hers. I tossed and turned for hours, unable to figure out what to do. Terry would be coming home from his assignment in just a few days. Once he got back, the whole $10,000 issue would probably be swept under the rug because there would be no realistic way to get the money back from Charlotte. That's when I made up my mind. I was going to take a risk. For once, I was going to make sure my mother-in-law understood that I wasn't foolish enough to let her do whatever she wanted and get away with it. The wedding had ended that afternoon, but Terry's closest friends were still downstairs, drinking, laughing, and carrying on as if the celebration would never end. Standing by the bedroom window, I looked down and saw my husband already drunk enough to barely keep his balance. Even so, he was still shouting along with his buddies. None of them were in much better shape. Every one of them was stumbling around. A few had already passed out wherever they happened to fall, completely unconcerned with the world around them. I glanced at the clock. It was past 11 at night. Honestly, I wanted to go downstairs, break up the whole party, and finally get some sleep. We had spent the entire day rushing around with the ceremony, the reception, and everything else that came with a wedding. Anyone would be exhausted. But then again, today was a special day. I decided to be the understanding wife and let them enjoy themselves. Terry could have this one night with his friends. After today, though, I planned to get my husband properly under control. Thinking that, I gave my drunken husband one last look, closed the window, and went to bed. With how tired I was, I should have fallen asleep instantly. Instead, the noise drifting up from downstairs kept me awake. I lay there staring around the unfamiliar room that was now our newlywed bedroom. My eyes eventually landed on the wedding portrait hanging on the wall. Seeing Terry and me smiling at the camera in our wedding clothes brought a smile to my face. It reminded me of how we first met. Our story had started with a misunderstanding. I was an emergency room doctor at a hospital in Columbia, South Carolina. Terry was a friend of one of my patients. That patient had insisted on leaving the hospital before finishing treatment. I explained that his condition wasn't stable enough for discharge, but he refused to listen. Hospital rules were clear. If a patient chose to leave against medical advice, a doctor couldn't force them to stay. At the time, he didn't even have family with him. After doing everything I could to persuade him, I finally prescribed medication and told him to return immediately if anything changed. The very next day, he came back in severe pain. This time, Terry was the one who brought him in. The moment he learned I had been the doctor treating his friend, he tore into me. He accused me of being irresponsible, demanded explanations, and even threatened legal action. It wasn't until someone showed him the signed discharge paperwork proving his friend had left on his own that Terry finally stopped talking and started apologizing. Back then, I was far too busy seeing other patients to care much about his apology. Apparently, Terry cared enough for both of us. After that day, he somehow got my phone number. Then, he started finding excuses to visit the hospital. One day, it was a headache. Another day, it was wrist pain. Every time, he insisted on waiting for me specifically. Afterward, he would use his friend's recovery as an excuse to keep in touch. It took almost a year before I finally agreed to date him. 2 years later, we were standing at the altar getting married. Looking back, our relationship was both funny and frustrating. My work schedule was always packed, leaving me with very little free time. Sometimes I honestly wondered how Terry managed to stay so loyal to someone as busy as me. When we decided to get married, I even transferred out of the emergency department to a less demanding position so I could have more time for our future together. Lost in those memories, I eventually drifted off to sleep. The shrill sound of my alarm dragged me out of sleep. It was 5 in the morning. Even though I was exhausted, I forced myself out of bed. It was my first day as a daughter-in-law, and I knew I couldn't sleep in like I normally would. Terry had apparently made it upstairs sometime during the night. He was sprawled across the bed, snoring loudly, still wearing his tie and shoes. The smell of alcohol was strong enough to fill the room. Shaking my head, I helped him out of his jacket, loosened his tie, and took off his shoes so he could sleep more comfortably. Once that was done, I washed up and headed downstairs. Before the wedding, my mom had reminded me that a new daughter-in-law should be hardworking, and the easiest thing I could do was help clean around the house. Terry had brought me here several times before we got married, so I was somewhat familiar with the layout. Gavin and Charlotte's bedroom was downstairs near the staircase. The door was still closed, and the room was dark. I figured they were probably exhausted after all the wedding preparations. Terry had told me Charlotte usually got up very early because of her produce stand at the local farmer's market. After sweeping the front porch and tidying up the yard, it was barely 5:30. No one else was awake yet. Since the house was still quiet, I walked to a nearby market to pick up breakfast for everyone. One of the vendors noticed I was unfamiliar and asked if I had recently moved into the neighborhood. When I told her I was Charlotte Lopez's new daughter-in-law, she nodded in recognition. Charlotte? The lady with the produce stand over by the market entrance? I smiled and said yes. The woman chuckled. Well, her son is a good man. Polite too. Looks like you did all right for yourself. But let me give you a little advice. Be careful with your mother-in-law. Charlotte can be pretty difficult when she wants to be. I laughed awkwardly, not knowing what to say, but her words stayed with me. On the walk home, I found myself thinking about the times I had visited Terry's family before the wedding. The first time I met Charlotte, she had been all smiles. She happily accepted the gift basket I brought and welcomed me into the house. During dinner, she asked about my job and how much I earned. When she heard I was a doctor, she seemed especially interested. I remembered thinking the questions were a little personal, but Terry told me his mother was naturally curious and didn't mean anything by it, so I didn't think much of it. The second time I visited, Gavin was outside working on an old sedan. Charlotte and Gavin had to run an errand, so I ended up cooking lunch by myself. Somehow, just as I finished, they came home and everyone sat down to eat together. The third visit happened shortly before the wedding when Terry and I were shopping for wedding items. Charlotte kept trying to tag along. I started getting the uneasy feeling that she expected us to live together after marriage, and for the first time, I felt a little uncertain about the wedding. Somehow, Terry managed to handle the situation because after that, Charlotte stopped insisting on coming everywhere with us. The wedding went exactly the way we wanted. Thinking back, Charlotte had never actually done anything outrageous. Maybe she was simply sharp-tongued because she'd spent her whole life running a business. After all, she had raised a son as decent as Terry. Surely she couldn't be that terrible to live with. Reassured by my own reasoning, I carried the breakfast home with a much lighter heart. As soon as I reached the front door, I heard voices coming from inside the house. Charlotte and Gavin sounded frantic. Think carefully. Where did you put it? Gavin asked. I brought it into our room before I went to bed, Charlotte replied. Are you sure? Look again. That box was huge. How could it just disappear? I know I put it there before I went to sleep. Why can't I find it now? I set the breakfast bags on the kitchen counter and hurried toward their room. Both of them were searching through drawers and cabinets as if something extremely important had gone missing. What's wrong? I asked. Gavin looked up when he saw me. We're looking for the wedding card box. Your mother-in-law swears she brought it into the bedroom last night. We found the gift box from family members, but the box with all the cards and gifts from your friends is gone. Then I remembered. Before Terry went downstairs to celebrate with his friends, he had carried the wedding card box upstairs and told me to count everything later and put it away. I had been too tired to deal with it at the time. Oh, that box is upstairs in our room, I said. Before I could finish the sentence, Charlotte spun around and stared at me. What do you mean it's upstairs? She demanded. I put it in our room. How did it end up in yours? Did you go through our things? Her tone caught me completely off guard. Just yesterday, she had been warm and welcoming. Now she was speaking to me like I was a stranger. Charlotte, what are you talking about? I asked. Terry brought it upstairs himself and told me to count everything. I was too tired and never got around to it. The box is still exactly where he left it. I didn't even know it had been in your room. Right then, Terry came downstairs, rubbing his eyes after hearing the commotion. When he realized his mother was questioning me, he stepped in immediately. I moved it upstairs, Mom. Those wedding gifts belong to Jasmine and me. Why wouldn't I bring them to our room? Charlotte hesitated for a moment. Then she quickly changed her approach. Well, you should have told me. You moved it without saying anything, so naturally I thought it was missing. She pointed toward the stairs. Bring it back down here. Let me take a look through it before you keep it. Terry frowned. Why do you need to look through our wedding gifts? Just in case somebody put something in there by mistake, Charlotte replied. Some of the older guests might have mixed things up. Terry shook his head. Jasmine and I can check that ourselves. If anything was misplaced, we'll return it. Charlotte had no answer for that. Terry simply took my hand and led me upstairs. As we passed her, I noticed the irritated look she shot in my direction. The moment we entered our room, Terry handed me the box. Count everything, write it down, and put it somewhere safe. If something really was put in by mistake, we'll return it. But honestly, I doubt that's the case. I looked at the box, then remembered breakfast waiting downstairs. Let me feed everyone first. I can count it afterward. Terry hesitated, as if he wanted to say something else, but then nodded. All right, just do it after breakfast. After Terry went into the bathroom, I headed downstairs and started setting out breakfast for everyone. Charlotte soon came out and sat at the table. Her mood had completely changed again. She smiled warmly and said, "This looks good. Did you buy these biscuits from that lady near the market entrance?" I shook my head. I'm not sure what her name is. I just saw a lot of people buying from her stand, so I figured it must be good. Charlotte's smile faded slightly. Oh, her food is decent enough, but she charges too much. Next time, don't buy breakfast from her. Yes, ma'am, I replied politely. Personally, I didn't see the problem. It was only breakfast, and it wasn't as if we'd be eating there every day. Good food was good food. Once everyone finished eating, I carried the wedding card box upstairs. Terry had already left to take care of something outside. I spread the cards across the bed and began counting the cash gifts one by one. I was almost finished when the bedroom door opened. Charlotte stepped inside carrying a laundry basket. Do you two have any dirty clothes? She asked with a smile. I can throw them in with the wash. Before I could answer, her eyes drifted to the pile of envelopes spread across the bed and the stack of cash in my hand. She set the basket down and sat beside me. Looks like you two have a lot of friends, she said casually. Did you get much? Most of our friends are working professionals now, I replied. They were very generous. So how much is it all together? She asked. Without thinking much about it, I answered honestly. Around $10,000. I still have a few cards left to count, but it'll probably be close to that. Charlotte's expression changed ever so slightly. Her eyes stayed fixed on the money in my hand. She looked like she wanted to say something but couldn't quite decide how to start. Is something wrong? I asked. No, she said quickly. She stood up, picked up the laundry basket, then paused. That's a lot of money for a young couple. People your age tend to spend without thinking. Money disappears faster than you realize. I waited for her to continue. Maybe you should let me hold on to it for you, she said. I can put it in the bank and earn some interest. Whenever you need it, I'll give it back. The moment those words left her mouth, alarm bells went off in my head. Let me hold it. Whenever you need it, I'll give it back. I'd heard enough stories from other women to know exactly how that usually ended. The money somehow stopped being yours, and when you asked for it back, you'd have to beg for your own savings. So I smiled politely and answered the same way many smart daughters-in-law would. Terry and I are planning to save this money for a house, so we'll probably need it ourselves. If we're fortunate enough to have extra savings later, we'll definitely let you help us invest it. Charlotte's face tightened for a brief moment. She knew I had turned her down. With a quiet huff, she picked up her basket and headed for the door. Then she stopped and turned around again. Nobody accidentally put money meant for me in there, did they? No, ma'am. Everything was clearly labeled. Charlotte glanced one more time at the stack of cash before finally leaving the room. That evening, when Terry came home, I told him about the conversation. He laughed. It's our money. We should keep it ourselves. If we ever need it, it'll be right there. You take care of it, okay? I'm putting you in charge. I grinned and gave him a mock salute. Yes, sir. Terry was a career soldier. His base had always been close enough to home that he could come back regularly. For some reason, though, his unit was being reassigned and exchanged with another unit. The deployment was expected to last a year, and Terry's name was on the list. We hadn't even been married for 2 months before he received orders to relocate to Texas with his unit. One evening, we sat together in our bedroom talking about it. "Terry," I said quietly, "I know living with your parents isn't a bad thing, but I also want a place where it's just the two of us. Maybe we should get our own place when you come back." Terry thought about it for a moment before gently pinching my cheek. "Mom and Dad are getting older. Honestly, I like being close enough to help take care of them. And if we have a baby someday, it'll be nice having them around when we're both busy." He paused and smiled. "But you're the boss, remember? So I'll think about it seriously. When I come back from this assignment, we'll make a decision together." Then he gave me that goofy grin of his, and before long, we were lying in bed holding each other. Even so, I couldn't completely hide my disappointment. I didn't want to pressure him. He was already preparing to leave for a year. The question of moving out could wait until he came home. The day Terry left was harder than I expected. Charlotte, Gavin, and I all went with him to say goodbye. I couldn't stop crying. Terry wrapped his arms around me and pulled me close. "It's only 1 year," he said. "Don't worry. After this assignment, I'll try to transfer into a position that keeps me closer to home." I nodded through my tears. No matter how much I wanted him to stay, I still had to let him go. 2 days after Terry left, I already missed him terribly. We had only just gotten used to being husband and wife, and now we were separated. The only thing I could do was bury myself in work and hope the days would pass a little faster. About a week after Terry left, I was getting ready for bed when I heard a knock at my door. When I opened it, Charlotte was standing outside. "It's getting late, Charlotte. You're still awake?" I asked. "I need to talk to you about something," she said. "Of course. What is it?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stood there looking uncomfortable, glancing at me and then at the floor. It was obvious she was trying to find the right words. "I need some money for inventory," she finally said. "Some people still owe me money, and they haven't paid me back yet. Do you have anything you could lend me?" Her request caught me off guard. From everything I'd heard, Charlotte and Gavin both received retirement income, and her produce stand was more of a side business than a major source of income. Why would she suddenly need that much cash? "How much do you need?" I asked. $10,000. This time my suspicion immediately grew. $10,000 for a small produce stand? That didn't sound right. More importantly, it was exactly the same amount Terry and I had received in wedding gifts. Seeing the hesitation on my face, Charlotte quickly continued. "It's only for inventory. I'm in a temporary bind because a few people haven't paid what they owe me yet. They promised I'll have the money in a week. As soon as they pay me, I'll pay you back." I suddenly found myself in an awkward position. Refusing my mother-in-law could make me look stingy and selfish. Lending her the money felt risky. What if getting it back became a problem later? "Trying to buy myself some time," I said. "The money isn't here right now. Let me go to the bank tomorrow and see what I can do." The smile disappeared from Charlotte's face almost instantly. For a split second, I caught a look of disappointment in her eyes. Then she forced a smile. "All right, just go tomorrow, okay? If you can get it, bring it home right away. The supplier is already asking for payment, and I can't afford to damage my reputation." "I'll go tomorrow and let you know," I replied. Charlotte stood up to leave. Before walking out, she reminded me once again not to forget. The moment she was gone, I called Terry. "Honey, Charlotte came by asking to borrow money," I said. "What does she need it for?" he asked. "She says she needs inventory for her produce stand." "How much?" $10,000. There was a brief silence. $10,000 for produce? Terry repeated. A moment later, he sighed. "Just lend it to her. If anything comes up, I'll talk to Mom myself." All right. The next day, I withdrew the money and handed it to Charlotte. The second she saw the cash, her entire face lit up. She thanked me over and over again, calling me a wonderful daughter-in-law and saying her family was blessed to have someone like me. Her praise was so exaggerated that I almost laughed. I simply smiled and let her talk. A week passed, and Charlotte never mentioned repaying the money. I didn't bring it up either. I assumed the people who owed her money were running late, but when more than 2 weeks went by without a word, I started getting worried. That night, I called Terry. Charlotte said she'd pay us back once those people paid her, but it's been over 2 weeks and she still hasn't said anything. I don't want to ask her myself and make things uncomfortable. Could you talk to her? Sure, Terry replied. I'll call her. Apparently, he called right away. A few minutes later, Charlotte's voice echoed through the house. I already told you they haven't paid me yet, so I don't have the money! I could hear Terry speaking through the phone, though not clearly enough to understand what he was saying. Charlotte's voice grew even louder. What? Now you're chasing me over a little loan? I raised you all these years. Does $10,000 really matter that much to you and your wife? What are you afraid of? That I'm going to keep it? Terry responded again. Charlotte cut him off. I said I'll pay it back when I have it. Stop asking. Even if you keep bringing it up, I don't have it right now. A second later, she hung up. Then I heard Gavin say something. Charlotte snapped at him too. What do you know? Just watch your TV. This is none of your business. After that, the house fell quiet. I quickly ended my own call and pretended to be asleep. The next morning, I got up as usual and made breakfast. The moment Charlotte sat down at the table, she looked straight at me. What exactly did you tell Terry last night? She asked. Why was he calling me in the middle of the night asking for money? Do you think I'm trying to cheat you? I carefully placed a bowl on the table. I didn't mean anything by it. I was just talking to Terry. I didn't know he was going to call you right away. Don't act innocent with me, Charlotte snapped. You lend me a little money and then start asking for it back every chance you get. You think after raising Terry all these years I'd run off with your money? That's not what I meant. I just thought maybe you forgot. I didn't forget. Her voice immediately sharpened. Why are you in such a hurry? Planning to send the money back to your parents? I stared at her. What? No. Charlotte slammed her hand onto the table and pointed at me. That's exactly it. You wanted to send that money to your family. That's why you hesitated when I first asked to borrow it. If I hadn't talked to my son, you never would have handed it over. Charlotte, that's not true. She didn't let me finish. Then let me tell you something. I'm not giving it back. I'm not going to let you take money from this family and hand it to your parents. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. How can you even say that? I've never done anything like that. Charlotte immediately raised her voice. Listen to her. She's only been in this family a short time and she's already trying to sneak money back to her parents. What a blessing she turned out to be. Just then, Gavin walked into the dining room after hearing all the shouting. What's going on? Before I could say a single word, Charlotte jumped in. She's trying to send money to her parents. I knew it from the start. Just look at her. My chest tightened with humiliation. That's not true. The money was a loan. Don't twist the story, Charlotte cut in. You think you're going to fool Gavin too? She kept talking over me every time I tried to explain. By then, Gavin seemed to understand what had happened. He looked at me and said, Go upstairs. I was so upset I couldn't say another word. I simply turned and walked away. Behind me, Charlotte kept yelling, You'd better watch yourself! The moment I stepped into my room, the tears I'd been holding back finally came. Before Terry left, Charlotte had seemed strict but reasonable. I never imagined she would go this far, over $10,000. She had borrowed the money, refused to return it, and somehow turned me into the bad person. I looked up at our wedding photo hanging on the wall. Terry, please come home. Please come home and protect me. I'm scared things are never going to be peaceful again. After crying for what felt like hours, I finally pulled myself together and went to work. I showed up at the hospital with swollen eyes, and nearly everyone who saw me asked if I was all right. I could only smile and blame it on too much coffee and not enough sleep. That evening, I told Charlotte and Gavin that I had an overnight shift and wouldn't be coming home. Instead, I stayed at the hospital. I called Terry, hoping to hear his voice, but before I could even say much, he told me he was busy. I didn't want to add more pressure to everything he was already dealing with, so I simply told him to take care of himself and ended the call. Afterward, I lay alone in the on-call room hugging a pillow and cried myself to sleep. Unfortunately, pretending to have overnight shifts wasn't something I could keep doing forever. The next afternoon, I had no choice but to go back home and face Charlotte again. During dinner, she barely spoke at first. I thought maybe things had cooled down. I was wrong. Normally, Charlotte would sit in front of the television while I cooked and only come to the table once everything was ready. This time she followed me into the kitchen and watched everything I did. That's too much oil, she said. Use less. A few minutes later, she spoke again. Why are you making so much soup? Nobody's going to finish all that. Then came another comment. Do you think money grows on trees? This house doesn't print cash. I swallowed my frustration and kept cooking. No matter how unfair she was being, she was still Terry's mother and my mother-in-law. Arguing with her wouldn't solve anything. I focused on finishing dinner as quickly as possible. The meal itself was uncomfortable. I barely ate before excusing myself and going upstairs. Even after dinner, the criticism didn't stop. While I was washing dishes, Charlotte complained that I used too much dish soap. According to her, I was wasteful. Day by day, she became exactly like the difficult mothers-in-law I'd only ever seen in television dramas. The difference was that now I was living with one. She seemed to know I wouldn't talk back, which only encouraged her to keep pushing further. Gavin stepped in to defend me whenever he could, but he wasn't home very often. And even when he was, Charlotte usually shouted him down before he could say much. Sometimes he ended up retreating in silence. Little by little, the peaceful home I thought I had married into was disappearing. Those miserable weeks finally eased up a little when Terry came home on leave. He only had 2 days off, but having him back in the house changed everything. Charlotte wasn't nearly as harsh toward me as she had been before, though she was no longer as warm and welcoming as she had been when I first married into the family. That night, before we went to bed, Charlotte called Terry downstairs to talk about something. When he came back up, he acted completely normal. I didn't think much of it. It had been so long since I'd been able to sleep beside my husband that all I wanted was to hold him and enjoy the comfort of having him close again. As we lay together, I told him everything I'd been keeping inside. I told him how lonely I'd been, how difficult things had become after he left, and how much I missed having him around. Terry wrapped his arms around me and held me tightly. "I'm sorry," he said. "You just got married and then had to deal with all of this by yourself. It's only 1 year. I'll try to transfer back to my old unit after that so we can be together again. Just hang in there for me." "I hate being away from you," I admitted. "I miss you all the time." "Then call me whenever you want," he said. I hesitated before bringing up the subject that had been bothering me the most. "Charlotte keeps getting worse. She still says I wanted to send money to my parents, and that's why she refuses to return the $10,000. Terry fell silent. His arms tightened around me. For a while, he didn't say anything at all. Maybe he had believed from the beginning that Charlotte truly needed the money. Maybe he had honestly expected her to pay it back. Eventually, he spoke. "What if we just consider it a gift for Mom and Dad?" I pulled back and stared at him. "What?" "I know what we plan to do with that money. I know we were saving it for a house. But can we just consider it a gift to my parents? Please. I'm asking you to understand." I looked into his eyes. There was something there that stopped me from arguing. He looked exhausted, helpless, like he was caught between his wife and his mother and didn't know how to make things right. I wasn't someone who missed those kinds of things. I knew there was probably more going on than he was willing to tell me. So in the end, I nodded. "Okay." Relief spread across his face. He pulled me into his arms again. "Thank you. Thank you for understanding." I rested my head against his chest. If this was the decision he had made, then I would support him. A marriage only worked when husband and wife stood together. I just hoped Charlotte would stop making life difficult for us after this. We stayed like that for a while before Terry gently lifted my chin and looked at me. Months of missing each other seemed to flood back all at once. He kissed my forehead, then my eyes, my cheeks, and finally my lips. Before long, we were wrapped up in each other the way newlyweds were meant to be. Terry stayed one more day before he had to fly back to Texas. At the airport, he spent time talking with Charlotte and Gavin before turning to me. He repeated the same instructions over and over. "Take care of yourself. Call me if anything happens. Don't keep things bottled up. If someone gives you a hard time, tell me and I'll handle it." I laughed, even though my eyes were already stinging with tears. Then he was gone again. It would be months before I saw him in person. Terry had barely been gone a day when Charlotte started asking questions again. "Now that he's stationed so far away, he must be getting extra pay, right?" she asked. "Did he leave you any money before he went back?" This time I answered without hesitation. "Yes, he gave me some money, but he told me to keep it put away and only use it if I really need it. He also said I should let him know before I touch it. So don't worry, Charlotte. I'm not sending it to my parents." The moment the words left my mouth, I stood up and headed toward the stairs. Behind me, Charlotte shot me a dirty look. "You'd better watch yourself," she said. "If I find out you're sending money to your parents, you'll regret it." I didn't respond. I simply went upstairs to my room. Once inside, I looked at our wedding photo hanging on the wall and quietly counted the days until Terry would come home again. Not long after that, the hospital asked me to submit some original documents for an application to an advanced medical training program. Unfortunately, I had forgotten to bring the paperwork with me. Around lunchtime, I rushed home to get it. Normally, I never came home in the middle of the day. I usually ate lunch at the hospital and worked until evening. So when Charlotte saw me walk through the front door, she looked surprised. "What are you doing home?" she asked. "Just grabbing some documents," I replied. "I need them for work." The hospital was a fair distance away, and I only had a short lunch break, so I didn't stop to explain. I hurried upstairs and went straight into the bedroom. In my rush, I didn't notice that I had left the bedroom door open. I unlocked the safe, took out the documents I needed, and left as quickly as I had arrived. That evening, I came home from work, tossed my bag onto the bed, and froze. The safe door was wide open. A wave of panic rushed through me. I ran over and checked inside. My savings were gone. The gold jewelry my parents had given me was gone. Everything of value had disappeared. Only my documents were still there. I bolted downstairs. "Charlotte! Charlotte!" I shouted. "We were robbed!" Charlotte was sitting on the couch watching television. She frowned at me. "Robbed? What are you talking about?" "The money and gold from my safe are gone. Someone broke in." Charlotte switched off the television and slowly stood up. "What exactly is missing?" I rushed back upstairs, and she followed behind me at a much calmer pace. I pointed at the open safe. The documents were still inside, untouched. Only the cash and jewelry were missing. Strangely enough, nothing else in the room had been disturbed. "Did you leave the window open when you went out?" Charlotte asked. I hesitated. I don't remember." I looked toward the window. It was open. Maybe I really had forgotten to close it when I rushed back to work. Charlotte immediately shrugged. "Then who are you blaming? If you leave a window open, what do you expect?" With that, she turned around and walked out. I stood there staring at the empty safe. The loss hit me harder with every passing second. Inside had been the gold jewelry my parents gave me as part of my wedding gifts. There had also been the $5,000 Terry brought home before returning to Texas. He had told me to deposit it into the bank, but I had been so busy that I kept putting it off, planning to take care of it on my next day off. Now everything was gone. I called Terry and broke down, crying the moment he answered. "What happened?" he asked immediately. "The money and the gold are gone," I sobbed. "Everything! Everything?" Terry sounded stunned. "Did you call the police?" I wanted to, but Charlotte keeps saying we shouldn't bring trouble into the house. Deep down, I had already started wondering if Charlotte had something to do with it. The timing felt wrong. Her reaction felt wrong. But I had no proof, and I didn't want to create more problems for Terry while he was away, so I kept those thoughts to myself. Terry spent a long time trying to comfort me. "Let's treat it as a lesson," he said gently. "Next time we'll be more careful." I cried even harder. "Just come home, Terry. Please come home. I don't think I can handle this much longer." Gavin also tried to comfort me when he heard what happened. "Try not to dwell on it," he said. "Money and possessions can be replaced. At least you're safe." Before I could say anything else, Charlotte spoke up. "Why don't you spend a few days with your parents?" she suggested. "It'll give you a chance to visit them, and maybe it'll help take your mind off everything." Looking back, I should have noticed how unusual that was. Charlotte hadn't exactly been kind to me lately, yet now she was encouraging me to leave the house. At the time, though, I was too upset to think clearly. The loss of my savings and jewelry had left me emotionally drained. The idea of seeing my parents sounded comforting, so I agreed. I requested a few days off from work and drove to my parents' house in Lexington. My mother looked surprised when she opened the door and saw me standing there in the middle of the week. "Jasmine, what are you doing here?" she asked. Then she smiled and pulled me into a hug. "Come inside." The moment she asked what was wrong, all the emotions I had been holding in came pouring out. I sat down and told her everything. I told her about Charlotte being away. I told her about Charlotte borrowing the $10,000 and refusing to return it. I told her about the constant criticism, the accusations, and finally the missing money and gold. Somewhere in the middle of the story, I completely lost control and started crying again. It felt ridiculous. I was an emergency room doctor. I'd spent years dealing with trauma, emergencies, and death. I'd always thought of myself as strong. Yet sitting beside my mother, I felt as helpless as a little girl. Mom listened quietly until I finished. Then she let out a long sigh and gently rubbed my shoulder. "It's all right, sweetheart," she said. "What's gone is gone. If you ever need anything, your father and I will help you. We can always buy more things later." I shook my head. "I don't want anything from you and Dad. I just want Terry to come home." My mother smiled softly. "A few more months. It'll go by faster than you think. And who knows? Maybe by then I'll have a grandbaby to spoil." Despite everything, her words made me laugh a little. For the first time in weeks, I felt some of the weight on my chest begin to lift. I stayed with my parents for several days, and during that time I realized something people often say is true. No matter how rough life gets outside, home is still the place where your heart can finally rest. My mother cooked all my favorite meals. She even made her baked shrimp mac and cheese, something I hadn't eaten in months because Charlotte couldn't stand cheese and never wanted it in the house. I didn't have to wake up before sunrise. I didn't have to rush out to buy breakfast. Mom took care of everything before I even got out of bed. In the evenings, I didn't have to worry about cooking either. My parents ate whenever they felt like it. If nobody wanted to cook, we'd simply go out. There were no rules, no criticism, no one watching over my shoulder. Those few days felt like therapy. Little by little, the tension I'd been carrying around seemed to wash away. By the end of the week, I felt like a different person. Eventually, though, life had to return to normal. Work was waiting, and so was my life at my in-laws' house. One evening, I drove back to Columbia and arrived before it got too late. I let myself in and quietly closed the front door behind me. Before I even reached the living room, I heard Charlotte's voice. She was speaking loudly on the phone. "My son just got an increase in his deployment pay," she was saying proudly. "He bought me a few more gold rings so I could finally have something nice to wear." I stopped where I was. A strange feeling crept over me. Terry had bought her gold rings? That didn't make sense. Terry had told me the $5,000 he gave me before returning to Texas was the full amount of his additional deployment pay. That money had already disappeared with everything else from the safe. So where was this new money coming from? I quietly stepped closer and listened. Charlotte kept talking. "As for that $10,000, don't worry about it. It was wedding money they let me keep anyway." My heart skipped a beat. Wedding money? Let her keep? That wasn't what happened at all. She had borrowed the money and promised to return it. I leaned in a little farther, trying to hear more clearly. Then my foot slipped. I stumbled and hit the ground hard. The noise echoed through the house. Charlotte rushed over. The second she saw me, she looked startled. "When did you get home?" she demanded. "What happened?" "I just got back," I said, trying to hide the pain. "I missed a step." "I'm fine." Charlotte glanced like she wanted to ask more questions, but her phone started ringing again. She answered immediately and walked away without another word. As she lifted the phone to her ear, I noticed something on her hand. A gold ring. One I had never seen before. I went upstairs and sat on the edge of the bed, replaying everything I'd just heard. The more I thought about it, the less sense it made. Could Terry have secretly given Charlotte money without telling me? I shook my head. That didn't feel right. When Terry handed me the $5,000 before returning to Texas, he had been completely straightforward. He told me it was the additional pay he received for being away from home. He even reminded me to keep it somewhere safe until I could deposit it. Nothing about that conversation felt dishonest. Besides, after everything that had happened with the $10,000, why would he choose to give money to Charlotte instead of me? No, that didn't sound like Terry, which meant someone else wasn't telling the truth, Charlotte. But if Charlotte was lying, where had the money come from? How had she suddenly started buying gold jewelry? Just a short time ago, she supposedly needed $10,000 so badly that she had to borrow it from me. Now she was casually wearing a new gold ring and talking as if money was no longer a problem. A thought crept into my mind before I could stop it. What if the missing money and gold from my safe had something to do with Charlotte? I sat there in silence for several minutes. Then I shook my head again. Charlotte was difficult. She was controlling. She was unfair. She had taken the $10,000 and refused to return it. But stealing? That was something else entirely. No matter how upset I was with her, accusing someone of theft without evidence was a serious thing. Charlotte and Gavin both received retirement income. She also had her produce stand at the farmer's market. Maybe she really had another source of money that I didn't know about. Maybe I was letting my anger cloud my judgment. I kept trying to convince myself of that. Yet no matter how many times I did, the feeling wouldn't completely go away. The image of that gold ring stayed in my mind. The things Charlotte had said on the phone kept repeating in my head. I wanted to talk to Terry about it, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. What would I even say? That I suspected his mother of stealing from me? What if I was wrong? What if all I accomplished was damaging the trust between us? Terry was already carrying enough stress being away from home. I didn't want to put him in the middle of another fight, so I kept my thoughts to myself. Besides, Terry only had a few months left before he came home. I told myself I could wait. I just needed to get through a few more months. One day, while I was working at the hospital, Gavin called me in a panic. He told me Charlotte had been hit by a car and was being rushed to the emergency room. The moment I heard that, I dropped everything and ran downstairs to the ER. Thankfully, her injuries weren't life-threatening, but she had suffered a fractured leg. The doctors placed her leg in a cast and told her she wouldn't be able to walk normally for at least a month. After helping complete the paperwork and pick up her medications, Gavin and I brought her home. I called Terry as soon as we got back. He was extremely worried when he heard what happened, but there was nothing he could do from Texas. He couldn't simply leave his assignment and come home. Relax, I told him. You married a doctor, remember? She's going to have the best care available. I'm only telling you so you know what's going on. Don't worry. I said those words to reassure him, but deep down, another concern had already started growing in my mind. If Charlotte couldn't walk for the next month, who was going to take care of her? I worked full-time at the hospital and couldn't take a leave of absence. Gavin was retired, but he wasn't in a position to handle everything himself either. The more I thought about it, the more complicated the situation seemed. A little later, Charlotte called me into her room. "I'm going to be stuck in bed for a while," she said. "Who's supposed to take care of me?" "I was actually thinking about that," I replied. "Maybe we should hire a caregiver or a housekeeper for a few weeks." Charlotte frowned. "Since when did this family become rich enough to hire help?" Then she pointed at me. "You're the daughter-in-law. It's your responsibility to take care of me." "I understand, but I still have my job." Before I could finish, Gavin stepped in. "She has a career. You can't expect her to quit work and stay home. Hiring help is the sensible solution." Charlotte shot him a glare. For a moment, I thought she was going to argue. Instead, she sat quietly and thought about it. Finally, she nodded. "Fine, hire someone if you want, but you're paying for it." Relief washed over me. "Of course, that's fair." I was about to leave when Charlotte stopped me again. "One more thing," I turned back. "Because of my leg, I can't run my produce stand anymore. You'll need to give me your paycheck too. The money you've been giving me isn't enough." Gavin immediately objected. "Charlotte, that's ridiculous. We still have my retirement income. Why do you keep treating her like this? You don't know what you're talking about," Charlotte snapped. Gavin looked ready to argue, then gave up and walked out of the room in frustration. Charlotte turned back to me. "Did you hear me? Your salary goes to me. I need it to pay the caregiver and cover household expenses." "Charlotte, I still need money for lunch, gas, and everyday expenses," she frowned. "I'll let you keep $400 a month. That's more than enough." "400? I repeated. "We're negotiating now?" "Enough. Go upstairs. I need to rest." I wanted to keep arguing, but she had already dismissed me. Defeated, I went back to my room and immediately called Terry. "I can't keep living like this," I said. "I want us to move out." Terry sighed. "I'll send you more money. Just hang in there a little longer. I'm coming home soon." Hearing the exhaustion in his voice broke my heart. He was trying so hard to keep everyone happy. In the end, I gave in again. It was only another month or two. Once Charlotte recovered, maybe things would settle down. A few days later, Charlotte hired a housekeeper named Hannah. She was a middle-aged woman who seemed energetic, capable, and easy to talk to. Charlotte liked her. Seeing how quickly Hannah settled into the routine, I felt relieved as well. Most of the household responsibilities were handed over to her. Every now and then, I would check Charlotte's leg to see how it was healing, But beyond that, I didn't have much to worry about. After Hannah had been with us for about a week, she already knew where everything belonged and how the household operated. For the first time in months, I wasn't responsible for making breakfast and dinner every day. When I came home from work, dinner was already prepared. All I had to do was eat, shower, and go upstairs. Every few days, I would examine Charlotte's leg and make sure her recovery was progressing normally. Having so many chores removed from my daily routine felt wonderful. Better yet, I didn't have to spend nearly as much time around Charlotte. Life became noticeably easier. Then, about a month later, it was time for Charlotte's follow-up appointment. I drove her to the hospital to see whether the cast could finally come off and whether she could start physical therapy. We were already on our way when we realized we had forgotten some of her paperwork, so Gavin and I turned around and went back to the house to get it. When we arrived, I noticed that Charlotte and Gavin's bedroom light was on. That struck me as odd because Hannah should have been alone in the house. Curious, Gavin and I walked toward the room. The moment we stepped inside, we found Hannah going through drawers and cabinets. "Hannah," I said sharply. "What are you doing?" She froze. I. Gavin stayed near the doorway while I moved farther into the room. The closet had been completely ransacked. Then I noticed the safe in the corner. It was open. Cash had already been removed and piled onto a blanket spread across the bed. Beside the money were several jewelry boxes. Something about them looked familiar. I picked one up and opened it. The second I saw what was inside, my stomach dropped. It was the gold necklace my parents had given me as a wedding gift. The engraving was still there. My name, Jasmine. I slowly turned toward Gavin. He still looked confused, unable to understand what he was seeing. In that moment, while neither of us was paying attention, Hannah suddenly bolted for the door. She shoved past Gavin so hard that he lost his balance and fell. I dropped the jewelry box and rushed over to help him. Thankfully, he wasn't seriously hurt. Once I was sure he was all right, I gathered the cash and jewelry exactly where Hannah had left them and took photographs of everything. Then I locked the room and returned to the hospital. I told Gavin not to say anything to Charlotte yet. I didn't want her finding out before we had time to think. Besides, I worried the shock might affect her appointment. Throughout the entire visit, I had to fight the urge to confront her right there in the hospital. When we finally returned home and opened the bedroom door, Charlotte immediately noticed that everything inside was in disarray. "What happened in here?" she shouted. "Why is my room such a mess?" Then she spotted the open safe. "My money! My jewelry!" She spun around and pointed directly at me. "You did this on purpose, didn't you? You pretended to forget my paperwork so you could come back here and go through my things. What exactly are you trying to do?" I stood there quietly and let her perform. If Gavin hadn't been with me that afternoon, I might not have been able to defend myself at all. Hannah would have escaped, and Charlotte probably would have blamed everything on me. Gavin finally stepped forward. "The person who did this was the housekeeper you hired. Jasmine and I caught her in the room. She ran the moment she saw us and even knocked me over trying to get away." Charlotte let out a sharp huff. "Then why didn't you say that at the hospital?" "Because Jasmine didn't want you getting upset before your appointment," Gavin replied. Charlotte didn't respond. Instead, she wheeled herself toward the bed and started gathering the money and jewelry into her arms. Only then did I speak. "Charlotte, earlier I saw something in that pile of jewelry." She looked up. "What?" "I saw my gold necklace, the one my parents gave me as a wedding gift," Charlotte answered immediately. "What necklace? There wasn't any necklace of yours in there." Gavin looked back and forth between us, clearly confused. I kept my eyes on Charlotte. "The necklace my parents gave me on my wedding day. It has my name engraved inside it. It disappeared from my safe months ago." "Why was it in your room?" Charlotte fell silent. She turned her face away and hugged the pile of cash and jewelry tighter against her chest, as if she were afraid someone might take it from her. Something changed in Gavin's expression. He walked over and reached for the bundle in Charlotte's lap. She tried to hold on to it, but this time he wasn't backing down. "Let go," he said firmly, "or I'll call Terry right now. Better yet, maybe I should call the police and let them sort this out." Charlotte's grip slowly loosened. Even then, her eyes never left the pile. Gavin began searching through the jewelry boxes one by one. It didn't take long. He found the necklace. The engraving was exactly where I said it would be. Jasmine. Gavin stared at it for several seconds. Then he looked at Charlotte. The disappointment on his face said everything. Without another word, he set the necklace down and walked out of the room. Charlotte turned toward me and pointed a finger in my face. "This is all your fault!" she snapped. "Everything was fine before you came into this family." I didn't answer. I still couldn't understand what I had done to deserve any of this. Gavin came back a few minutes later looking exhausted. He sat down heavily and shook his head. "I never thought I'd see something like this," he said quietly. "What kind of mother steals money and wedding jewelry from her own son and daughter-in-law, then pretends the house was robbed?" Hearing him say it out loud brought back memories I had tried to ignore. Deep down, I had suspected Charlotte after the break-in, but I never had proof. Looking back now, the signs seemed obvious. Most people would panic if they discovered a thief had entered their home. They'd check every room, make sure nothing else was missing, and call the police. Charlotte had done none of those things. She had only blamed me for leaving the window open. I had ignored every warning sign because I didn't want to create problems for Terry. Now the truth was sitting right in front of all of us. For the first time since the money and jewelry disappeared, I felt like I had finally been cleared of all the accusations Charlotte had thrown at me. Gavin wanted to call Terry that very night. There were only 4 people in this family, and somehow things had reached this point. He said Terry was a grown man with a wife and responsibilities of his own. Since the people involved were his mother and his wife, he should be the one to deal with it. But I stopped him. "Please don't call him yet," I said. "He's in the military. It's not like he can just leave because something happened at home. Besides, he only has 2 months left before he comes back for good. If we tell him now, all we'll do is make him worry." Gavin looked at me thoughtfully. Eventually, he nodded. Charlotte sat in her wheelchair the entire time, still wearing the same sour expression. After I finished speaking, she muttered something under her breath. I couldn't make out the words, but I doubted they were anything nice. Gavin turned back to me. "Then what do you want to do?" A small smile tugged at the corner of my mouth. The truth was, I had been thinking about that ever since I saw my necklace in Charlotte's room. During the entire hospital appointment that morning, I had been running through possibilities in my head. If Terry came home now, the most likely outcome was simple. He would demand that Charlotte return my money and jewelry. Then he'd insist we move out. Under normal circumstances, that would have been exactly what I wanted. But Charlotte still couldn't walk properly. Terry wasn't home yet. Even if we wanted to move out, who would take care of Charlotte and Gavin? More importantly, I didn't just want my stolen jewelry back. I wanted the $10,000 Charlotte had taken from us too. Only after I recovered everything would I feel comfortable leaving. Besides, there was something else I'd learned from all of this. If you can't make someone like you, sometimes the only option is to make sure they think twice before crossing you again. After everything that had happened, I never wanted to deal with another scheme like this. I took a deep breath. I think if Terry comes home and learns the truth, he'll want to move out immediately, I said. And honestly, I wouldn't blame him. But with Charlotte's leg still healing, I don't think this is the right time. Gavin listened carefully. I could tell he had already started imagining exactly how Terry would react. Charlotte suddenly spoke up. "You really think my son would choose her over us?" she snapped. "He'd never abandon his parents because of her." "No," I said calmly. "I don't think Terry would abandon either of you, but I do think he would refuse to let me keep living under the same roof after everything that's happened. At that point, moving out would be the only option." Charlotte glared at me. I deliberately kept my expression neutral, though inside I knew exactly what I was doing. "Don't get your hopes up," she shot back. Before she could continue, Gavin cut her off. "Be quiet and let her finish." Charlotte finally stopped talking. I looked at Gavin. "All I want right now is my jewelry and the money Terry gave me before he went back to Texas. Beyond that, I'm not asking for anything. Let's keep this between us until Terry comes home. I don't want him distracted while he's still away." Gavin nodded slowly. "That sounds reasonable." Then he turned toward Charlotte. "Did you hear her? She's younger than you, yet she's acting like the adult in this room." Charlotte raised her voice. "What do you know? She was taking money back to her parents." "No, I wasn't," I replied. "And even if I wanted to, what money would I have left to send? You already took the wedding money?" Gavin's head snapped toward Charlotte. "You took their wedding money too?" I lowered my eyes, hiding the satisfaction I felt. There was no point protecting her anymore. "Yes." Charlotte said she needed inventory for the produce stand. She promised to pay us back after a week. A month later, she still hadn't returned it. When I asked about it, she accused me of trying to send money to my parents. Gavin stared at his wife in disbelief. "You actually did that?" Charlotte opened her mouth, then closed it again. "I was just holding it for them," she muttered. "Holding it?" I asked. "If you were holding it, why didn't you tell us that? Why did you make it sound like we had no right to ask for it back?" Charlotte had no answer. I continued. "And after Terry found out, he told me to treat it as a gift for his parents. A gift is something people give willingly. That's very different from having it taken from them." Gavin let out a long, weary sigh. The disappointment on his face seemed deeper than anything I'd seen before. "Go get their money and jewelry," he said to Charlotte. "Now." Charlotte looked away. "I only have the $5,000 Terry gave Jasmine and the jewelry. The $10,000 isn't here anymore." Gavin's eyes narrowed. "Then where is it?" Charlotte hesitated. "I loaned it to Grace. She said she'd pay me back when she could." Gavin rubbed a hand across his face. "I don't even know what to say anymore." Then he turned to me. "Take back the money and jewelry for now. When Grace repays the loan, I'll personally make sure every dollar comes back to you." I nodded. At that point, there wasn't much else I could ask for. A few minutes later, Charlotte reluctantly handed over the cash and jewelry. Her face was full of resentment. She couldn't stop glaring at me. I didn't care. For the first time in months, I finally had proof. I had my jewelry back. I had my money back. And now I knew exactly where the missing $10,000 had gone. After that day, Gavin canceled the housekeeper immediately. He said one bad experience was more than enough. From now on, he would handle lunch himself, and I would take care of breakfast and dinner again. Charlotte could complain if she wanted, but nobody was going to hire another stranger into the house. Because of that decision, I no longer had to hand over money every month to Charlotte. I bought groceries myself. If work got busy, I ordered delivery or picked up food on the way home. Life slowly became simpler. The chores were still there, but one thing had changed completely. The constant criticism and endless accusations had stopped. Charlotte still glared at me whenever she got the chance, but after what happened, she couldn't push me around the way she used to. In a strange way, the house felt more peaceful than it had in months. I spent my days working, helping around the house, and waiting. Terry continued calling regularly. Whenever we spoke, I acted as though everything was normal. Charlotte did the same. Gavin did too. It was as if everyone had silently agreed to keep the truth hidden until Terry came home. Maybe Terry missed home too much. Maybe he was too busy counting down the days. Either way, he never seemed to notice anything unusual. Then, just a few days before Terry was scheduled to return home for good, the opportunity I had been waiting for finally arrived. One morning, I took time off work to handle paperwork for my advanced training program. The appointment ended much earlier than expected, so I headed home ahead of schedule. Charlotte had no idea I would be back so soon. As I stepped inside, I heard her laughing loudly in the living room. She was talking to someone. Then I heard my own name. Instinctively, I stopped and moved closer to the window. "Oh, my daughter-in-law?" Charlotte said with a laugh. "She's not as innocent as she looks." Another woman laughed on the other end of the conversation. "Really? She always seemed polite enough." "Polite?" Charlotte scoffed. "If it weren't for me, my son would have handed me the $10,000 himself. Instead, I had to come up with a whole plan to get it." The woman laughed again. "Well, thanks to that money, I got through my own rough patch. Speaking of which, I'm bringing it over today. $10,000 plus a little extra for interest." My pulse quickened. Grace. It had to be Grace. "Good," Charlotte said. "Bring it by this afternoon. I need to put it somewhere safe before that girl finds out it's been repaid. My husband already wants me to give it back to her." The two women laughed together. I stood perfectly still outside the window. Every word settled into place. The money was coming back. Today. Before Terry returned home. Slowly, a smile appeared on my face. For months, I'd been waiting for a chance to recover what belonged to me. Now, I finally knew exactly when the money would arrive and exactly where Charlotte planned to keep it. I hired a locksmith to open Charlotte's safe. Once it was open, I took exactly $10,000. Not a dollar more. Not a dollar less. There was still some cash and gold jewelry left inside, probably worth another $3,000 or $4,000, but I left all of it untouched. I only took what belonged to me. Afterward, I locked everything back up exactly the way it had been before. Then I locked the bedroom door, locked the house, and drove straight to the bank. The moment the money was safely deposited into my account, I finally felt like I could breathe again. Later, when I knew Charlotte and Gavin had returned home, I pretended I had been out taking care of errands and came back as usual. I asked Charlotte how she was feeling, made dinner, and acted as though nothing had happened. The only difference was that once I got to my room and locked the door, I couldn't stop smiling. Charlotte didn't check her safe often. 2 days passed and she still hadn't noticed anything missing. 2 days later, Charlotte still hadn't noticed anything missing from her safe. That same week, Terry officially transferred back to a unit near Columbia. He arrived home late in the afternoon because he had spent the morning reporting to his new command before being released. That evening, we finally had a proper family dinner together. It felt like the first real reunion we'd had in a very long time. For months, I had been counting down the days until Terry came home. Now he was finally sitting across from me at the dinner table instead of talking through a phone screen. That night, I fell asleep wrapped in his arms. For the first time in months, I felt completely at peace. I didn't know how long I had been asleep when a voice suddenly rang out from downstairs. "Jasmine! Jasmine! Where are you?" I opened my eyes slowly. The bedroom was still dark. Dawn hadn't fully broken yet. Beside me, Terry was sleeping soundly. After everything he'd been through over the past year, he seemed completely exhausted. "Jasmine!" Charlotte shouted again. I grabbed my phone and checked the time. 5 o'clock in the morning. I was still half asleep, but it was obvious Charlotte wasn't going to stop yelling. I forced myself out of bed and made my way downstairs. By the time I reached the bottom of the staircase, Charlotte was already standing there waiting, one hand on her hip and the other gripping the banister. The moment she saw me, she narrowed her eyes. "Did you take my money?" she demanded. My $10,000. I rubbed my eyes and stared at her in confusion. "What money? Don't play dumb with me. The $10,000 I kept in my safe is gone." She stomped her foot against the floor like an angry child. "It's been sitting there all this time. Nothing else is missing. Only $10,000. You took it." I blinked and looked around. Gavin had already come out of his room, looking just as confused as I was. A few seconds later, Terry appeared at the top of the stairs, still trying to figure out why everyone was awake before sunrise. "Charlotte, how would I even know you had money in a safe?" I asked calmly. "I don't know where you keep your money. I don't know what's inside your safe. How can you accuse me of taking something I didn't even know existed?" Charlotte immediately tried to move toward me. "Stop lying!" she shouted. "Who else could it be?" She raised her hand as if she wanted to slap me, but Gavin quickly stepped between us and grabbed her arm. "What are you doing?" he snapped. "It's 5 in the morning." By then, Terry had reached the bottom of the stairs. He looked from Charlotte to me and frowned. "Can somebody tell me what's going on?" Charlotte pointed at me. "Your wife stole my money. Tell her to give it back right now or this won't end well." Terry turned toward me. "Jasmine?" I shook my head. I have no idea what she's talking about. I woke up to her yelling. "That's all I know." "Still denying it?" Charlotte shouted. $10,000 disappeared. Exactly 10,000. Grace brought it back the other day. If you didn't take it, then who did? The moment the words left her mouth, the room went silent. Gavin stared at her. "Grace paid you back?" he asked. Charlotte's face changed immediately. She realized she had said too much. Gavin took a step forward. "Why didn't you tell me Grace had already returned the money?" Charlotte opened her mouth but couldn't find an answer. Terry looked completely lost. "What money? What is everyone talking about?" Gavin let out a long sigh and rubbed his forehead. "Come into the living room," he said. "It's time you heard everything." Everyone moved into the living room. Terry sat beside me on the couch while Gavin remained standing. Charlotte stayed where she was, arms crossed tightly over her chest. The atmosphere was so tense that nobody spoke for several seconds. Finally, Gavin broke the silence. Starting from the beginning, he told Terry everything. He told him about the $10,000 Charlotte had borrowed from us and never returned. He told him how she accused me of trying to send money to my parents. He told him about the missing jewelry and cash from my safe. Then he told him about Hannah being caught in Charlotte's room and about the necklace with my name engraved inside it. Terry listened without interrupting. The farther Gavin got into the story, the paler Terry became. When Gavin finally finished, the room fell silent again. Terry slowly turned toward Charlotte. "Mom," he said quietly, "tell me none of this is true." Charlotte looked away. "Your father is exaggerating." "Exaggerating?" Gavin snapped. "The necklace was in your room. The money was in your room. How exactly am I exaggerating?" Charlotte didn't answer. Terry lowered his head and sat there for a long moment. When he finally looked up again, his eyes were full of disappointment. He turned toward me instead. Before I could say anything, he wrapped his arms around me and pulled me close. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." I felt my throat tighten. For months, I had carried everything by myself. The loneliness, the accusations, the humiliation, the constant feeling that nobody truly understood what I was going through. And now, at last, Terry knew. "I should have listened to you sooner," he said. "I should have protected you." I shook my head. "You're home now. That's enough." Terry held me a little tighter. "No, it's not enough. You never should have had to go through any of this." For the first time since our marriage began to fall apart under all the pressure, I felt the weight lifting from my shoulders. In the end, all I had ever wanted was for my husband to understand the truth. All the tears, all the frustration, all the sleepless nights suddenly felt worth enduring. As long as Terry believed me, the rest no longer seemed impossible to overcome. After that day, Terry decided it was time for us to move out. He also chose not to pursue the missing $10,000 any further. No one said it out loud, but everyone in the family seemed to believe Charlotte had staged the whole situation because she didn't want to return the money. She tried to explain herself more than once, but by then, nobody believed her anymore. As for me, I decided to keep my own secret. I never told Terry that I had already recovered the $10,000. Instead, I set it aside and treated it as savings for our future child. If Terry ever asked about it, I planned to tell him my parents had given it to us for the baby. We were already talking about starting a family that same year. Life after moving out was wonderful. It felt like we were newlyweds all over again. We spent time together whenever we could and enjoyed the simple peace of having our own home. After everything we had been through, I finally understood something important. No matter how difficult a mother-in-law or father-in-law might be, as long as your husband knows right from wrong and is willing to stand beside you when it matters most, any hardship can be overcome.